Welcome to Ranting Politics Headline Updates. I'm JOC, bringing you today's top political stories that have everyone talking. Coming up, we'll dive into the high-stakes U.S.-Russia talks kicking off in Saudi Arabia today, with some dramatic developments, including the UK's surprising offer to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. You won't believe what Prime Minister Starmer is proposing. Then, our own Vice President J.D. Vance stirs the pot at the Munich Security Conference with some choice words comparing Elon Musk to Greta Thunberg. Let's just say the Europeans weren't exactly thrilled. We've got Mexico threatening U.S. gunmakers with fresh legal action as Trump pushes to label cartels as terrorist organizations. The tension between these neighbors just keeps ratcheting up. Senator Rand Paul is demanding answers about what's really in Fort Knox, calling for the first gold audit in nearly 50 years. The story behind those missing audit reports will raise your eyebrows. And finally, politics hits the ice as U.S.-Canada hockey rivalry takes an ugly turn with national anthem protests. Wait until you hear what happened in just the first 9 seconds of the game. Stay with us. We've got all these stories and more. In breaking news, high-level talks between the United States and Russia over the Ukraine conflict are set to begin today in Saudi Arabia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz are all heading to Riyadh for these crucial negotiations. The Saudis aren't just playing host, they're taking an active role in mediating these discussions, with their National Security Advisor leading their team. This comes hot on the heels of their successful role in securing Mark Fogel's release from Russia just last week. Now here's where it gets interesting. While Ukraine won't have a seat at the table for these initial talks, Trump's Russia-Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg is running what they're calling a dual-track set of negotiations, with plans to be in Kyiv this week. The president himself has assured that Ukraine will eventually be part of the process. But the real bombshell dropped when UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer announced he's ready to put British troops on Ukrainian soil to enforce any potential peace deal. Writing in the Daily Telegraph, Starmer argued this would strengthen not just Ukraine's security, but Britain's and Europe's as well. This has set off alarm bells across Europe, with leaders scrambling to hold an emergency summit tomorrow. There's growing anxiety that Trump's push to work with Russia might leave them out in the cold. French President Macron has called together the heads of Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, the Netherlands, and Denmark, along with top EU and NATO officials for what they're diplomatically calling an informal meeting. Starmer's trying to play both sides, calling this a once-in-a-generation moment, while emphasizing the importance of keeping the US and Europe united. But let's be real. With Trump working his Saudi connections and Europe feeling sidelined, this diplomatic dance is getting more complicated by the minute. Vice President J.D. Vance just stirred up quite a storm at the Munich Security Conference with a spicy take on Europe's relationship with tech mogul Elon Musk. In a speech that had European leaders shifting uncomfortably in their seats, Vance delivered what might be the political zinger of the week, suggesting that if American democracy could weather a decade of Greta Thunberg's climate crusade, surely Europe could handle a few months of Elon Musk's criticism. The vice president's remarks came as part of a broader critique of European censorship policies, where he urged leaders to pay more attention to their voters' concerns. It's worth noting that Musk has been locked in an ongoing battle with European regulators, particularly over content moderation on X, and his somewhat controversial endorsements of right-wing political movements. The European Commission has recently ramped up its investigation into whether Musk's platform violates EU content rules, while Musk himself has been throwing verbal jabs, calling the Commission undemocratic and demanding EU-wide referendums on major policies. He's also ruffled quite a few feathers by supporting Germany's Alternative for Germany Party and Britain's Reform Party. But Vance's comparison to Thunberg wasn't just a random shot in the dark. The now 22-year-old Swedish activist spent years giving American politicians some pretty uncomfortable moments, including that memorable 2019 Senate appearance where she told them they simply weren't trying hard enough. She later questioned how long they thought they could ignore climate issues without facing consequences. The vice president's remarks highlight the growing tension between American and European approaches to free speech, tech regulation, and political discourse, all while managing to throw a bit of diplomatic shade with a smile. As they say in politics, sometimes the sharpest points are made with a touch of humor. In a bold move that's raising eyebrows on both sides of the border, Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum is throwing down the gauntlet against U.S. gunmakers. She's warning that if Washington moves forward with designating Mexican cartels as terrorist groups, these manufacturers could find themselves facing fresh legal charges as accomplices to organized crime. Let's put this in perspective. We're talking about 74% of weapons used by criminal groups in Mexico coming from north of the border, according to U.S. Justice Department figures. That's somewhere between 200,000 and 750,000 American-made weapons crossing the border annually, with many showing up at crime scenes. This comes hot on the heels of reports that the State Department is planning to slap the terrorist organization label on several criminal groups, including Mexico's heavyweight Jalisco New Generation and Sinaloa cartels. President Trump's January executive order set this process in motion, declaring these cartels a national security threat beyond typical organized crime. The timing is particularly interesting, considering Mexico's previous $10 billion lawsuit against 6 U.S. gun manufacturers was dismissed last August due to jurisdictional issues. Though they're still pursuing cases against Smith & Wesson and Interstate Arms, this new terrorist designation could open up fresh legal avenues. Adding fuel to the fire, tensions between these neighboring nations are already running high after Trump's recent threat of 25% tariffs on Mexican goods over immigration and drug smuggling concerns. Though these tariffs are currently on pause, Sheinbaum isn't pulling any punches, especially after rejecting White House allegations of government cartel collusion. As she put it rather pointedly, if there's any alliance with criminals to be found, it's in those U.S. gun shops selling high-powered weapons to these groups. The stark contrast between the two countries' approach to firearms couldn't be more clear. While Mexico maintains extremely tight controls on legal gun sales, they're fighting an uphill battle against weapons flowing south from the U.S. In a development that's raising serious questions about America's gold reserves, Senator Rand Paul is demanding the first comprehensive audit of Fort Knox in nearly half a century. This call for transparency was sparked by a viral exchange on X, where Elon Musk expressed surprise at learning the nation's gold hasn't been reviewed in decades. The numbers we're talking about here are staggering. 4,580 tons of gold supposedly stored in those Kentucky vaults. The last time anyone took a proper look was during a drawn-out audit process from 1974 to 1986. Even then, only 97% of the gold was verified. And here's where things get really interesting. 7 out of 13 audit reports from that period have mysteriously vanished. You might think keeping track of the nation's gold reserves would be a top priority, but attempts to get answers through Freedom of Information Act requests have hit dead ends. The Treasury Department, the National Archives, and the Office of Inspector General all seem to be playing a game of bureaucratic hot potato, with none of them able to produce these missing documents. This isn't just about counting bars of gold. Former Representative Alex Mooney tried to address this back in 2021 with a bill demanding a full accounting of America's gold holdings. His reasoning was pretty straightforward. With our current levels of government spending and mounting national debt, knowing exactly what's in our gold reserves isn't just good bookkeeping, it's a matter of national security. Meanwhile, as we're sitting here wondering what's really in Fort Knox, countries like Russia and China are steadily building their gold reserves, potentially threatening America's financial dominance. Paul's call for an audit isn't just about transparency, it's about ensuring one of our nation's most valuable assets is exactly where it's supposed to be. The latest face-off between the U.S. and Canadian hockey teams turned into more than just a game, folks. What started with boos during the American national anthem at Montreal's Bell Centre quickly escalated into an old-school hockey slugfest, with gloves hitting the ice just 9 seconds into the match. The Americans ultimately claimed victory with a 3-1 win, but U.S. defenseman Zach Werenski wasn't exactly thrilled about the pregame reception. These boos, mind you, aren't coming out of nowhere. They're apparently the latest chapter in an ongoing protest against Trump's recent Canadian tariff threats and his playful jabs about making Canada the 51st state. The game itself? It was like watching the good old days of hockey. The Tkachuk brothers put on quite a show, with Matthew dropping gloves with Brandon Hagel right off the opening faceoff, while his brother Brady went toe-to-toe with Sam Bennett. JT Miller and Colton Parayko rounded out the opening night fight card. Despite the hostile atmosphere, the Americans seemed to use it as fuel. After McDavid opened the scoring for Canada, Jake Guentzel answered back with 2 goals, including an empty netter, and Dylan Larkin chipped in another to seal the deal. As Guentzel put it after the game, the packed house and electric atmosphere made for something pretty special, even if it wasn't exactly the warmest welcome for Team USA. Well, folks, that wraps up another action-packed episode of Ranting Politics Headline Updates. We've covered quite the range today, from high-stakes U.S.-Russia talks in Saudi Arabia to the brewing tensions in Europe, Mexico's bold stance against U.S. gunmakers, Senator Paul's push for that long-overdue Fort Knox audit, and even some heated international hockey drama. The world of politics never sleeps, and neither do we. For more breaking news and in-depth analysis, follow us on X at RantingRP, catch our latest videos on YouTube, and visit us at rantingpolitics.com. This is JOC, signing off. And thank you, our loyal listeners, for choosing Ranting Politics Headline Updates. We'll be back soon with the updates you need to navigate these interesting times. Until then, stay tuned, stay informed, and as always, stay free.